So we are back with award-winning author Lisa Rayne, who just read a fantastic excerpt from Never Cross a Highlander. And one of the things that struck me about this scene that you were reading is if I were to summarize it, it's actually very simple. She heals his, or she doesn't heal his wound, but she treats his wound, and then they're riding on a horse. But you made it so complex and nuanced, and where you were exploring every single layer of communication between them and what was going on in their head and what was actually happening on the page. I'm very curious, as a writer, how do you approach that? Like, did you know it was going to be this huge scene? And how did you enter the scene?
I don't know if I knew it was going to be a huge scene, but there's a little bit of enemies to lovers in this because, as we say, he inadvertently kidnaps her, and people are like, "How do you inadvertently?" Right? Because she's got a plan to escape on her own. He thinks she's part of a group he's trying to free, and those mixed signals mean he pretty much drags her along with him. So she's not real happy because this is not where she wants to be. And he's the leader of his clan army. He's a alpha male. He's used to being obeyed without question, and she questions him all the time. So there's all this frustration and tension, and they never can agree. But they're also physically attracted to each other. And under this tension, it is noticeable to each of them right away that there's a physical appeal of the other person, although they're thinking, but I don't like them very much. So how do you deal with something when you're physically attracted to someone, but you don't like them as a person? You don't like their personality. You don't like how they treat you. You don't like any of that, but you can't deny the underlying attraction. And they've just experienced something real intense right before this. So think Speed, where they say, I've heard that romances that start under intense circumstances don't last, right? It's one of those scenes. And this is going to be the first time where it's clear to each of them that they want to kiss.
Mhm.
And we all know that first kiss is really significant and important and what it does. But they have the added layer of these social norms that she's a single woman alone with a man, which she shouldn't be in the first place. And heaven forbid she give in to something that's physically desirous because good women, good girls, right, don't
Mhm.
do that. But she's raised by a single mom. She's illegitimate. She's raised by a single mom. She's dealt with the social norms, talking to her mom about, is her mom a whore or what's going on? What are this? But she's decided to live on her own terms anyway. And she's got to come to grip with what that means because now she's alone with this hot, sexy man who just saved her life and she's physically attracted to him. Yeah, a lot of tension there. And
A
so I
lot
knew
of
that was
tension.
important to convey.
Yeah. I think something else you did really well was communicate a lot of dualities. Like you said, it's enemies to lovers. There was also the duality of her attraction versus the social mores versus her own sex positivity, which isn't a term that she has, but that's what I'm
Right.
applying to
Right.
it. And also, there was a line in there about everything female in her coming out. And I didn't write down a line, but I think I picked up as well that, like, with Callum, there was a little bit of like his essential masculinity versus the larger part of his character. I once heard a quote that romance is all about power dynamics, and I think that was playing out very explicitly in this scene. Do you think about power dynamics as you are writing a scene or maybe even writing out a whole story?
Definitely at a scene level. There's an initial power dynamic that I have to know going in. What's the power dynamic? You know, what is this relationship going to be? Right? That's the foundation because there's some growth, we hope, for each character over the course. And a lot of that becomes a shift in that power dynamic, a shift or some nuance changes. So you have to know that. But then at a scene level, you have to decide what in this scene either relies on the power dynamic, will shift the power dynamic, or will cause conflict as a result of the power dynamic. There's all that going in. And this is what I call this an action adventure romance because for me, he's a guy with the sword. I sold the book as like Dirty Harry in a kilt meets Mr. and Mrs. Smith because, she's no wilting flower, headstrong, been independent, wants to stay independent. But within that, like I've always thought, like, why give a Highlander a big sword and then he never have a battle? So we've got some battle scenes, we've got some escapes, we've got, some drama. But within that, we still have to figure out how do these two people who are at odds fall in love with each other. And I need people to see. So when we get to that point, where they know they're in love with each other, the reader believes it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you see the shift in power, you see the compromise, you see whatever, but now you go, "Ah, now I know how she went from thinking he was an annoying, overbearing cad to being in love with this guy."